Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jenny He. I'm the host of today's CICS sessions. Welcome to the second session for today. Today, for this session, we have Rob Stroud from NatWest talk about their experience of upgrading to the CICS 6.1 version. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is a presentation that I did at the face-to-face GSE session last November. And it's a slightly, as always with me, a slightly irreverent look at CICS upgrades. Really, it's a pitch that's intended for everyone. There's some technical detail here, which we'll move down into. So if you're looking for technical stuff, please be patient. And there's some high-level stuff about upgrades, because we're a very large site, as people might know. So I'm going to go into some of the details of how big we are. It takes a long time to upgrade CICS, and therefore the knowledge can disappear nowadays. So really, it's an idea of giving you a good idea at a high level what an upgrade entails, what decisions go for, and what the experiences were like in this particular upgrade, which was an upgrade from CICS 5.4 to CICS 6.1. So without further ado, I'll get into the presentation. I've got about 30 foils, so it should be about 2 minutes. 2 minutes of foil, and we should be able to cope. Right, here's a cartoon picture of me. This is the normal header page for GSE, and it does what it says on the tin. Experiences upgrading to CICS TS 6.1. So that's a blocker for the agenda and the actual agenda. I'm just going to try and deal with some high-level questions to start with. Big questions: why do we upgrade? How often should we upgrade? How long does it take to upgrade? Risks, which is a big thing of all our roles nowadays, and what does the upgrade look like? And then we'll go into some of the detail. I'm not going to go into PTFs and issues like that, but if anyone wants to contact me online for further details or questions about any of this, I'm more than happy to have technical discussions in the spirit of GSE. So, big questions. Why upgrade? So I've been doing CICS for more years than I care to remember, somewhere between 30 and 40 years since university. And every time we do an upgrade, there are conversations that need to be had with all of the stakeholders, particularly the people that control the budgets. It's quite an expensive undertaking. IBM have done a lot to help us over the years and make it less expensive with the licensing models and things like that. That's made it a little easier. For us as a large site, it's certainly expensive in terms of resource, and I'll go into some of the resources that we need as we go through the presentation. The most common reason for all of us to upgrade, as much as we like doing business cases, and they're very important, but the most common reason is the current software that we're running for CICS is out of support. So you can think about the detail a lot, but that is one of the key drivers for business. I'd love to say it was new features and the great things that the labs at Hersley do for the next version, but because it takes certainly us over 12 months to upgrade CICS, that would be a long time for one of my development customers to wait for a new feature, for example. So it does happen, but typically things are going out of support. Again, IBM have done a lot of really good work. They can't tell you exactly when things will go out of support, but here's just some views or pictures from me. Typically, what I see now is IBM trying to stick to 5 years of support after a CICS release going GA. And indeed, you can purchase at a charge 3 years roughly of extended support as well, which kind of makes 8 years at a stretch if you want to go down that cost route for the last 3 years. But typically, it's a 5 year cycle. CICS releases, again, we see roughly 18 months, possibly to 2 years, depending on external things. The pandemic had some influence on that, but that's a typical cadence that I see as a customer. IBM are very helpful, but we can't draw them on exact figures. But luckily for me, I don't work for IBM, so I can say these things. There are things that we can do that we would do for performance gains. For example, things like ATTLS support, which could save MIPS by moving work that the CICS CWXN tasks do for web services or internet connectivity out of CICS stack and into the TCP/IP stack on ZOS, and that can save some MIPS. Or indeed, the wonderful world of audit and security, where some new feature helps protect our customers, and as we all know, that becomes top of the priority list quite easily. But most of the time, we're going out of support. Upgrades cost money, and we have to have those conversations. And typically at my site, at least 2 years before things go out of support, which is kind of when IBM announce it, roughly. And again, they won't be drawn on exact figures. So it's certainly something you need to be proactive about if it takes you a long time with your upgrade cycles. Yeah, we are a larger site. We do have a lot of CICS regions. I'm sure some of you that have been at GSE, we've had these discussions before. I run 4 different banking brands in the same production Sysplex. Those CICS regions are ring fenced from each other from a branding point of view, generally, which creates a lot of duplication. But it's all to do with the integrity of our customers' data and right and proper. When I've attended the CAF and other IBM events, large customers often share metrics on upgrades and things like that. Typically, most customers, and you may well do it at your site, they don't take each release of CICS every 18 months. Would be pretty hard for us to do that. Some customers skip one release, so they might go from 5.1 to 6.1, for example, or sorry, I missed out some releases there, 5.1 to 5.5, miss out one release. We tend to skip 2. And that's mainly because just the length of the upgrade that it takes on my particular site. I'm not recommending that as a strategy for anyone. And ideally, I would love IBM to get a cadence where we could skip 1. I think that would help us keep a little bit more current. 18 months doesn't fit into 5 years, for example. So there's always a decision to be had every time. It never quite looks the same. So there's just a list of the CICS regions. At the bottom, you'll see sometimes when we need new features, we have installed CICS regions for 2.1 when we've been running CICS 1.3, for example. And that does happen. So I've just put it on there as an example. How long does it take? Well, it takes us quite a long time. There are quite a few stages. One of the things that we did this time around is we downloaded a beta version. We'd never done that before. It does require a little bit of legals and dialogue with IBM, but to download a new version, it's not so much about new features nowadays, but it's a look and feel for our staff that work very diligently doing the SMP work and doing the installs to practice. And when you practice something, you get good at it. It's a large, complex environment. And if we can do that download when we start doing things properly and do it fast, that helps the whole project life cycle. So it's a really good tip. And that's certainly something that we plan to do again in the future. Had a very good experience with that, especially if IBM changed the install software, which can happen occasionally. Dev environments, we got 52 copies of production. We're actually running at the moment, we're doing really well. We're only running about 7-8K regions. Had a bit more of a purge lately of extra regions, but those things do need to be upgraded. A lot of it is automated now, but there are still some manual tasks that need to happen. Then we've got a pre-prod environment, 33 copies of production. We only run a subset of production regions, but roughly 6 or 7K regions to update. And production environment, I think we're probably just under, again, we've had a little bit of a housekeeping, just under 900 regions across the 4 separate banking brands that I mentioned. Gradually, we're migrating the dev environments and potentially pre-prod to more cloud-like environments where we only really have to upgrade a gold copy. And as the cloud environments are recycled, they should pick up the new versions of CICS. There are some manual tasks still in there, but we're definitely moving towards cloud type work. And I do foresee eventually those dev environments will come down to be a lot smaller than they are now, and a lot less hassle in an upgrade. I probably mentioned the ballpark figure, but generally it's about 18 months for an upgrade for us. It does depend how difficult, whether we've got 1 or 2 Christmases and change freezes for a few months in that upgrade cycle. It's a little bit more challenging from project plan if you've got 2 big change freezes for year end. Here's just a typical picture of clones of production. So in the dev 1 stream at the top, bug fix environment, typically there's like 6 separate environments that are clones of production, and they still kind of represent a waterfall strategy that matches products like Endeavour that follow a waterfall life cycle from unit test through to production. And we would have several streams created to handle parallel development. But that's a very simplistic picture of our test environment. It's much more complicated than that, I'm afraid, but I couldn't fit it all on the screen. So here's a bit of animation that's been put in, just so how we move infrastructure through to production. Indeed, the CICS upgrade. We upgrade things in the order that we want. So I'm going to scroll through that very quickly. That caught me out last time. I'd forgotten that was there. So how long does it take? Well, 18 months roughly, but the devil is in the detail. Certainly from a resourcing point of view, we sourced some, hopefully some experienced infrastructure PMs. We had some great ones. Luckily, the last couple of upgrades, and they've really added value to doing all this, because we really want to get on with the detail and the systems programming, and not worry about some of the politics and organisation, the testing teams and things like that. Certainly, I'll go into that, but a lot of testing is required. Because it's a lot of resource, historically, we used to get a whole team of contractors in to do that, who did a very capable job. But we wanted to bring those skills in-house. Experienced staff were getting older. There was a risk that those skills would leave the building completely, and we'd have to start again from scratch for the next upgrade. So we ended up using experienced contractors to backfill production support, project support, those kind of day-to-day work, and ring fence our current staff to leverage their experience, or indeed gain new experience. And I think pretty much we've got a large team, and most people worked on some parts of the upgrade this time around. And I think it was a very positive experience for our team in demystifying the upgrade process. I said devil's in the detail. Dedicated team of PMs, keeping skills in-house. High-level plan. I think I've got some to share on here. but detailed plan and timeline. Change freezes, probably the bugbear of every systems programming upgrade. If there were no change freezes, we'd certainly be looking at a much faster cadence than we experience, particularly those Christmas runs where we don't like to do anything. Being a bank, we're very busy with our customer payments, and we like to de-risk any customer impact by not doing upgrades and those types of things, which I think is a very common sense approach. So here's a lovely picture from Q2 2022 to Q4 2023. And that's really showing from top to bottom work that's done in the sand pit, sorting out decommissioning plans. Qplex is our dev environment, Mplex is pre-production, Pplex, there's a lot going on there. Now, I don't know if everyone's got CPSM, but one of the big things for any CICS upgrade is the CPSM has to be upgraded first. So what we actually tend to do is we're kind of running almost two upgrades in parallel, but one has to follow the other. So CPSM is upgrading all these environments first, and we're following along with the CICS regions or managed address spaces, or MASs, if you want to call them that in CPSM terminology, afterwards. And it's a very granular upgrade. We don't big bang anything. Some of the test environments maybe, but most of it is done in pilot schemes and in preparation for next steps. So CPSM gets fully deployed. In our sandpit, we've got two CMASs in development 6, pre-prod 6 and production 11, and there are maintenance points and web user interface setups, and there's also some CPSM workload management tasks that need to be upgraded as well. I think we do mention them later. Yeah, here we go. So we've got status servers, CPSM region status servers to manage the workload optimization, shared TSQ servers that need to be done first, 110 of those puppies, instances of CTG where load libraries need to change in order to talk to the correct release of CICS, EXCI interface, and the same thing with batch, EXCI interface changes in 1,000 plus of our 70,000 jobs that run overnight and during the day and interface with CICS at various points. I mentioned that we try and granularize things. One of the probably the most interesting tasks and the biggest debate amongst ourselves as systems programmers, and the biggest debate around risk, is which regions to do first. You know, we have some regions that really don't do anything, that we just use to upgrade to make sure everything works, and we haven't got the RACF wrong or anything like that. And then we have 10 tranches, T0 to T9, where we try and ramp up gradually in volumes, risk and complexity. And I'd suggest from a risk-based implementation approach, that's a very solid and sound approach to take. And there are always debates amongst ourselves, different viewpoints and diverse opinions to be taken into account, which helps build a really good risk profile for the update. And, that was a very positive experience. 27 regions, we had to upgrade again. So we were concerned, no impact to customers, but we had a process where we could back things out very flexibly and put things in again. And I will cover some of the issues later on that we had. We've got great support from IBM. And as you can expect, being a very large site that we are, we have some things that were very, very difficult to test at volume, particularly in the storage space. Okay, so I'm going into risks a little bit more. I've mentioned around skills. Previous upgrade members may have left. Skills not maybe in-house, third parties and contract staff. We don't want to rely on that. There are risks that we're not really wanting to do. Far better to have people working on it are going to be here for the next upgrade. I think that's a philosophy to continue. We always think that in 5 years' time, are those staff possibly going to still be here? It would really add value to the next upgrade. So that's we're very conscious of that nowadays. Probably years ago, it wasn't something that you wanted to factor in. Documentation that we produce from this upgrade for the next upgrade, again, is key. It has to be detailed, but also easy to understand. They're two paradigms that don't necessarily fit together. So a sort of guide and reference approach, really giving people a high level view of how the upgrade works, and the reference giving the detail that's necessary for systems programmers to reduce risk. Skipping releases does increase risk because there's more change between each version. It's a bit of an obvious one. Just about everyone skips one. We've often had to skip two, and it would be nice not to skip two in the future if we can organise IBM's cadence to fit our goals, because we don't want to do it too often. Thank you very much. The IBM documentation, big up for that. So years ago, you had to, if you were upgrading 3 releases, you had to look at separate sets of documentation. Now, IBM provide documentation with matrices on changes of many of the previous versions, going back quite a few levels. So you can see it all in one place, and that does make the preparation for change much easier. So thank you very much, IBM. It goes without saying that CICS upgrades will coexist with many other changes to application and also infrastructure. Certainly this time around, we had a ZOS upgrade to contend with, and several large application changes, which kind of maybe not gave us a problem with production implementation so much, but certainly even some of the test environments where there's risk being introduced by an upgrade into a very aggressive testing schedule. So there were lots of negotiations to have in that space. 100% next to bottom one is almost one of the most important ones. Probably should have put it at the top. You will need to apply maintenance during an upgrade if it's taking 18 months. A couple of releases ago, we probably didn't think about that too much, but this release we were very aware of it, and certainly we took 6.1 not long after it was GA. And again, as systems programmers, we had a long conversation. Certainly years ago, the phrase bleeding edge was a concern for myself and a lot of my colleagues. When you took something early piece of software, no one had really ironed the bugs out of it, and the risk was increased. It seems obvious. I think things are better now, but the fact is I'm going to be implementing in production a year after I've taken that cut. So I've got a year's worth of maintenance, at least, even longer, that I can apply, and any of those bugs that have been ironed out by other people, it makes my implementation a lot less risky. You've still got to manage those implementation drops and make sure that your testing cadence kind of fits in, and that you're not introducing anything that's untested later on in the project, because that would increase risk, not decrease it. Other tools and applications may have dependencies. That's another risk. It's always a bit scary when you've got a project that's relying on your new version of CICS, because all of a sudden you've got a dependency. We didn't really have that case. I tend to avoid it if I can, by controlling the translator and functions for the new version of CICS until I'm fully upgraded in production. Those processor groups and compile decks are available to application development, not as default, only if they need it by special request. And then we can manage the change, and we can't end up introducing risk, and someone might try to go live with code from the new version of CICS before production's been upgraded, for example. sorry, this is just a regurgitation of being bleeding edge. Again, just reinforcing the maintenance strategy. It's a very key approach to an upgrade that takes 18 months. Make sure that you have regular drops and keep your maintenance current before going live to production. But you've got to give yourself time for the testing as well. So a lot of thought goes into that one. What does an actual upgrade look like from start to finish? There are some main phases. The business case is probably the one that I get involved in, but also just being in contact with IBM, having a good relationship with our lab advocate, being a participant in the design partnership and the CAF, so that you get an idea of any new ideas that are coming along from IBM, and keep an eye on when things are going out of support, because it's really important to get a heads up on these things when you've got an 18-month project. You've also got to look at your own financials. For us, things generally tend to be in a financial year, January to December. So again, getting that business case prepared before it's needed, making sure you're up to date with the documentation, because that's liable to change, and getting your stakeholders, management team on board with roughly what year you're going to be doing the upgrade in well in advance. They're key things. Once we get the business case approved and we get some budget, we start getting the really experienced program management people on board. That's when things really kick off in terms of preparation, and that attention to detail planning, team building. Who's going to be on the team? Do we need to backfill? What's our sort of workload like? And sometimes, and it's been a while since things like MVS Logger came along in CICS 1.3, sometimes you'll have something really difficult to implement that introduces risk into CICS. And those of us who are a little bit longer in the tooth that can remember CICS 1.3 or I think 1.1 and 1.2, and the MVS Logger being introduced, journaling going out the window for a way to control CICS, that was a big change. And that required a lot of management of other teams, and MVS Logger and things like that, and a lot of dependencies. We haven't had too many of those things this time around, although we did have some issues with things that changed the behavior of CICS, which is very unusual, which I'm going to comment later on in the presentation. Okay, commencement, long, complex, detailed phases, the maintenance strategy, decommission, absolutely 100%. I think that's come much more to the forefront in this particular one for us. It's something where you have the after upgrade party, and there's quite a bit of work to do, or indeed we end up decommissioning stuff from the upgrade before 5 years ago, or even the upgrade before that, dare I say it. And we're much more on top of that situation than we were years ago, because we've recognised it and we put it into our plans. It's an important thing to do. It's not an afterthought. And we're now in a phase at the moment where we're doing exploitation. So there will be some new features from IBM, and if you keep up to date with the customer design partnership and things like that, you can get on the front foot of all these things. IBM do a great job of announcing new releases of CICS, and if any of you have seen any of the presentations that Jenny's done, for example, hopefully if you're upgrading to 6.2, you can be aware of all the useful things and make some plans to exploit things like the TRAN class management that's coming along in 6.2, for example, which is a key feature of the new product. Yeah, and otherwise, what's the point apart from not going out of support, which I said earlier on? It's always good for us as systems programmers to exploit the new features. Okay, devil's in the detail, and we're kind of halfway through, so I'm hoping that we're fitting in with the right timings, and we're just going to go through a little bit more some of the things that we've talked about previously, and some of the issues that we encountered. So review all the IBM documentation. It's really good now. I can't say how much better it is than it used to be years ago. Probably need to decode it or talk to the people that wrote it to understand it. But now I think it's great and well done. Identify any areas that are relevant to my environment between the new releases. So feature toggles is definitely becoming more of a thing nowadays. Some of the monitoring stuff, parameters, you're going to get more alerts, different error messages. We're trying to do more on automation of the upgrade and looking at new messages and things like that. Traditional things like sit, feature toggles fit in there now because I think that's sort of like modern sit things to a certain extent. And we have many debates with IBM about whether things should go in the sit or go in feature toggles, but it's much easier for them to put new things in feature toggles. That's why they appear first and may get hardened in the sit and subsequent releases, or may not, as our staff get used to USS and those kind of structures. Default values changing. That's been a deal for us in the past. It all depends on how you've got your sit set up, how you've got your overrides, whether you're hard coding overrides to the default stuff as a matter of course, which can protect you from default changes. But if a default change is really useful because storage allocation has changed, for example, then it can catch you out. So that's quite a long and laborious process. Resource changes, new resources that occur to be aware of, APIs and stuff like that. That can be something you can defer a little bit because, as I said, you keep the translator in your back pocket to start with. So if there are new APIs to exploit, you really want to control that. You don't want to open things up to your developers, really, unless you need it. Nothing wrong with advertising it, but just try and keep some control over APIs. CICS region configurations, certainly they can change. And for us, we're a very big CPSM, BAS shop. And this release was really good for CPSM. But historically in the past, I think we pushed the envelope as a customer on some of those things. So it's always something that we spend extra time being aware of. And if you are a CPSM shop nowadays, I'd certainly say that's a good place to focus. So what do I have to change? We followed that waterfall model and we've seen some of the project planning, but at environment level, we normally go sandpit, development, test, production. The cloud ZVM stuff, we have to be aware of because there might be projects in there that might need things. We've had a good experience with it this time, and it's we're trying to let the refreshers of the environment take care of CICS upgrades. But with some of the more experimental ones at the start of that cycle, we've got 40, 50 environments. We've had to do some manual adjustments there. And we're going to upgrade an LPAR level in a certain extent, application level, and we have to think about time periods like when the Christmas change freezes are coming and any tooling. So that's third-party products. For example, with 5.1, where a lot of CICS internals changed in the nucleus, there are a lot of upgrades for tools that work very closely with CICS, like AmigaMon type things, or expediter tools that are looking at a Band-Aid, looking at control block levels, because there are a lot of changes. This time round, we were fairly up to date with our OEMs, third-party stuff that interfaces with CICS, and we didn't have too much in terms of versions to upgrade, or maybe some maintenance to apply to get from 5.4 to 6.1. So from a tooling point of view, it was quite a reasonable experience. Also, IBM tooling, CICS PA, CICS IA, we're running those at the moment. And we did have to make some changes to IA, I think, but CICS PA was fairly new, so it was okay. CTG as well, and other subsystems that we interface. I don't know how you get on at your site, but our change control is very rigorous, with a lot of lead times, and certainly for mass CICS changes, when we're answering the questions, they tend to fall into a sort of high risk change board type environment. So again, having the right personnel with the right understanding of the changes involved in the project team, talking to other stakeholders far in advance is a key thing. Dry run of the upgrade in sandpit environment, downloading the software, I mentioned that earlier on. Goes without saying, the systems programmers, those who've experienced, those of you that aren't experienced, hopefully you haven't had to do it, but always have a back out. Always have a really smooth, dynamic, non-impactful back out approach to all of these things. And that's probably one of the key things that we try and do from a risk point of view when we're planning all these different tranches and phases in production. One of the things that I don't think we did too well, and we plan to do better in the future, is manage all the errors, particularly in the test environment. We have a lot of business as usual type errors from servers and connections, and certificates have expired in the test environment, and it's a mountain. So I don't like to use the word AI because I think it's a little bit of a soundbite, but certainly some degree of intelligence monitoring logs is something that we have done, and we're looking to enhance that and expand on that in the future, because we've got a lot of regions to shovel through, and automating that kind of stuff for the future is a good thing. And maybe even IBM might help us with that. Who knows? I can see at the CAF this year. Everywhere's different. Your shop is different to mine. My shop's different to yours. Other people on the call, their shops are different again. So impact between versions and different applications can be different. IBM go to great lengths to make sure that there is none, and CICS is backwards compatible for everything. But sometimes you might be running some kind of third-party 4GL, or you've lost the source, or something. You might run into the occasional bugbear that needs to be sorted out. And having good dialogue with all your application teams around the upgrade cycle, your support teams, application support teams, is really important. Should an application be recompiled with the CICS version? Generally, no. There are things that do need to be compiled more at systems programmer level, macro tables, global user exit programs. As a matter of course, they tend to get done and put into new libraries. It's recommended, and I don't know if it's a just in case thing or you have to do it, but it's certainly something that we do every time still. I'd like to make that a little bit easier, but I'm not sure how possible that is. Okay, so issues. There are a couple of behaviour changes with going from 5.4 to 6.1. I can't remember off the top of my head. I did know when I started this upgrade a while ago whether there was a 5.5 or 5.6 connotation to this, but I think this came in one particular version. But 32K com areas has always been a thing with CICS. It's a limit. Channels and containers came along years ago, and hopefully all of you have migrated all your applications to channels and containers, but I know in reality some of the older legacy applications are probably using com areas, which is fine. 32K com areas works really well, except if you're passing data between CICS regions. And I found this out a few years ago before the upgrade, and we had an issue, and it came along to bite us later on. I still, after being involved in CICS for 30, 40 years, don't remember this being in the manual, but it's in the manual today. I don't know when it was added, and I couldn't possibly comment on that. I'm sure it's been there forever. I certainly was saying that I've worked for IBM. But in the manual, it says you can't do com areas greater than 24K. And in actual fact, it's greater than 31K. There's 1K that's taken away and used for stuff, but it's fairly recent stuff as far as I can see. So what we had was 32K com areas working for 20 years, and now they don't. So it was a problem. IBM put a fix in, and there's a toleration feature toggle that allows you to manage CICS 5.4 regions talking to 6.1, 6.1 talking to 5.4, and I'm sure other versions of CICS as well. But when you're doing an upgrade, you don't upgrade all of your regions from 5.4 to 6.1. So you have to have a situation where 5.4 talks to 6.1 and 6.1 talks to 5.4 with the feature toggle. It kind of worked well, but we ran into problems with very complex scenarios where we had 5.4 talking to 6.1, talking to 5.4 again, and 6.1 to 5.4 to 6.1. And IBM helped us out with some fixes, and I can talk about that offline. I don't have all the details on that. But if you are sending com areas of 32K and you're doing an upgrade from, I think 5.5, watch out for that one. Some rigorous testing will be needed, and there are some fixes available to avoid the issues. And one of the most interesting bits of this was that we got it all working and we got it into production, but at some stage you have to take the feature toggle off, and when you take it off, the order in which you take it off regions, you have to think about that very carefully. If it was a big bang, and I think there was an assumption when it was invented that a big bang would be the way forward, that works, but you'd have to take all your CICS regions down to big bang it, and I'm sure nobody really wants to do that. So we have taken the feature toggle off now, and we did do it at a very non-busy time, and we were very careful, but we probably did notice some bends during that time. Nothing really customer impacting, but it's a tricky proposition to manage with that one. So please be aware. Change 2. Well, we have mentioned a fix on this one. I must have cut and pasted it in. So in some of our systems in production, we operate with not Tran TSO, I've spelled that wrong. Tran ISO, it's spelled better further on. And that gives us 1 megabyte chunks of EDSA storage for all our transactions that run in these particular strategic regions. Because of that, if your application developers have written some com area moves that might cause storage overlays between transactions, then they work, because you've got a 1 megabyte boundary, a huge amount of storage for your transaction to operate in isolation, and it can't overwrite on anybody else. You don't get any storage violations. So it works. And we had a situation where someone had maybe made a slight coding error, worked in test, worked all the way through to production. We upgraded to 6.1 and we had a failure. Non-customer impacting, thank goodness, but we spotted that and we backed out the region dynamically. And subsequent investigations in some parts of IBM storage management weren't working using transaction isolation, particularly in the LE space. Again, got details offline. But if you're using transaction isolation, you have to be very aware that your code is clean before doing the upgrade, because you may be in a situation where you would get failures for code that works currently in production. But there's a fix to restore the behavior. So my advice to you would be to get a fix on before you upgrade. And that should go away. But that's certainly one to watch out to, because I had a back change out, I think during the week of GSC in November, and we would have got the 6.1 upgrade completed, and we had to wait till after the Christmas change freeze to pop it back in once we got the fix. So, and we also changed the code to make it clean in the background. And there's a debate here, certainly for me, is whether it's quicker to get application development to make a code change or over them to get PTF to fix it. And I'll discuss that offline. I'm not going to discuss the rights and wrongs of that now. So testing parallel changes. I think that's something to be aware of. Years ago, we would upgrade our test environments, leave it for a month or two. No one phoned up or complained, so we go live in production. That isn't how things operate nowadays at my bank, and I'm sure at your shops it's not how you operate nowadays. So there's an awful lot of thought that we've put into test environments. So production support environments, when we're upgrading our test systems, which is kind of where they live, they stay at the previous version of CICS at 5.4 for a long time. And some of our bigger pre-production environments, we're going down a mixed route. So we've got 10 tranches to upgrade production, and over a period of months, that is a mixed environment. So we're trying to replicate that now in our pre-production environment. And also we have a production proving environment for all infrastructure changes, which we do the same thing. So ideally what you want is, if you're putting a change into production into a 5.4 region or a 6.1 region at any point in time during that 18 months, well, it's not, maybe 9 months of production's being upgraded, you want to be testing against the right version of CICS. And that's a challenge, but we are meeting that challenge. So we've got some really good ideas and automation and routines. For sure, we can improve on it, but having a test environment, matching the upgraded portion of production, matching it to production timeline, that's a kind of aspirational goal that I think we can probably achieve even better in the next upgrade. And that's one of the learnings that we've taken away from this upgrade. Probably the difficult bit is replicating everything in tests that we do in production. We've got some great test teams and some great testing, but we don't have 100,000 box that's a copy of production that we can test in, and we don't necessarily test all our 100 applications that run in CICS. Many of them mission critical, all at the same time. Yet we don't have that capability. You may do at your shop, and if you do, fantastic. Again, that's a kind of aspirational thing, maybe to work with, but it's outside my pay grade, unfortunately. Here's just some examples of things to think about during the upgrade. Change caused by upgrade. If you've got LPA equals yes, then you'll get some performance benefits of running multiple regions on CICS. You'll get less paging. But when you upgrade CICS and it's a mixed environment, you're not upgrading one LPA at a time, which could be a good strategy to do. If you've got LPA equals yes, you're going to have to run some of your CICS regions on the same LPA and LPA equals no. So those performance benefits will go out the window. At our particular shop, we run LPA equals no. We're very lucky to have the kind of capacity and resource to allow a lot of CICS regions on the same LPA and a bit of paging. At your shop, you may not. Certainly at other customer sites I've worked at, LPA equals yes has kind of been essential, because we just couldn't afford the memory on the CICS to have the amount of CICS regions that we wanted. So you've got to think very carefully about who is LPA equals yes, how long their LPA equals yes, and when the new version of CICS outnumbers the old version of CICS, then you need some kind of LPA change to support that, to minimize the performance impacts on a particular LPA. But yeah, more storage works really well, and LPA equals no works really well. Stakeholders, I think it's worth mentioning, again, if this is your first time thinking about an upgrade, Application teams are absolutely key. Capacity and performance team, they're key stakeholders. There may be changes to monitoring data. There may be changes to underlying performance of certain key components of CICS. And over the years, historically, upgrades have given performance benefits, but performance overheads as well, or performance trade-offs. So IBM do a good job trying to help us as customers, but they do make money out of how many bits we use. So we can't expect it all to be free. I think particularly at the moment, anything that comes into CICS where you can use specialty engines, not MVSCP, so you're not using MIPS. So Java workload with CICS Liberty, for example, can be of particular interest. Security team, security changes are all the time. We had some changes this time around with Cat1 transactions because we finally realized that no one logs onto them, so we don't really need user ID security as such. And there's some changes in there. Previous releases, Cat2 transactions have changed. And I've certainly had some of the role profiles changed in the manuals over the years because they didn't really reflect modern audit practices where we don't really have access to too much in production except under break glass. There were some role-based security recommendations in there that our security team were reading from the 1970s, I think. So we had that changed. All of those guys, also WebSphere Batch, when they were changing the XCI data set, they're all clients to me. So when I'm doing an upgrade, it's really important to have those guys in the loop, have them on board, have them giving feedback at all levels of the project planning. So we know that there's no impact to our customers, particularly in production. We have to think about, and luckily this time we didn't really have any bun fights, but we have to think about high value business change. So there may be some change to some key applications, and you may get told you can't upgrade CICS during those weeks or months when that's taking place. And you have to be aware of that, just like you're aware of the Christmas change freeze for all changes if you work for a bank. And also be aware of change boards. I think going along to change boards when it's not your change is a really good idea, because you get an idea of the moving sands of risk that take place in between upgrades. What is the key risks to a project might change after you've had a major incident, and you need to be aware of those risks that the change board are answering, because if you don't get through a change board and you don't articulate the right things and you don't document the right level of risks, you're looking at delays to those kind of changes that can be weeks or months. So it might sound like a political or non-technical issue, but it's certainly key to managing a large project of this nature. More upgrade considerations. You can upgrade your CSDs to the new version. It's backwards compatible, which is marvelous. We don't do that at our site, but I think it's worth a plug. I don't really have a view one way or the other whether doing it the latest way is better than the way that we do it, but we kind of stick to the way we do it because it just makes back out a little bit more granular for us. But you can certainly upgrade your CSD in advance now, so all the IBM bits can be upgraded, and you can run both versions of CICS from the same CSD. And there is a downside, because if you do copy to a new file, then you lose a little bit of the change records. So there are swings and roundabouts here, and you're all adults and you can make up your own minds around this one. It's just something we did discuss this time. So do I want to share CSDs? Do I want to upgrade them instead of copying them? One issue that I did hit this time round was some of the IBM programs in the CSD. It doesn't appear that you can override them. So it's a difference between versions. So the ABEN control program, DFH-ACP, which you may or may not be familiar with. Hopefully you don't get too many ABENs at your site, but he writes the little message on the screen. You might handle it and runs under transaction CSAC. We had a customized program for a particular reason, historical reason, and that wouldn't install. Just something to be aware of. I don't have all the documentation for what's changed with the C prefix stuff. Some of the programs you can still override. For example, some of the systems programming transactions like CEDA, you can still override because we do that in the test environment, stop people from using them in pre-prod and things like that. So there must be a list somewhere at IBM, but some of them you can override and some of them you can't now. So if you do have any customization of IBM programs, just be aware of that when you're doing the upgrade. It might have changed and it wasn't documented in the books. And really, this is just an idea about when you do have a problem. We encountered bugs for sure, and we got fixes. The great thing about this particular upgrade was that none of them really hit the critical path. And that was a lot of keen thinking from my colleagues and movement around of workload. So if we had a region that had a particular problem, we moved it down the line in the tranches, and the upgrade was taking months. So we could move things around from a risk point of view. And it kind of worked out until that last little storage upgrade just before Christmas, where we kind of ran out of road, which I was a little bit miffed about, but there we are, take it on the chin. So yeah, like, do I have a workaround? Great if you do, because that's non-impacting. Do I want to wait for a PTF? Or could I get away with a user mod? And you may or may not have rules over user mods and PTFs. Again, that's down to your particular site. I can't say that we're particularly happy with user mods and running those in production, for example, but we might use it to get over an issue in test upgrades, for example. And yeah, God forbid we should pause our upgrade. I think that's the horrible decision. Changing plans is a lot more palatable. And can I keep the bug off the critical path by making any of those decisions? And I would advise you to do so and delay the horrible decisions as far down the line, particularly if you're running towards out of support date, paying for extended support and that kind of stuff. So this is a little tour of what we did with our upgrade and just a general overview of all upgrades, and I'm out of time.
Thank you very much, Rob. There is a question from Made saying, how do you handle new security PTF during the upgrade period when you already have 2 versions of CICS in the system?
It would depend. It's a how long a piece of string answer, but it would depend on the nature of the security upgrade. I would obviously, if there's a security issue that impacts my customers in production, I would expect to apply that to the current version of CICS, move it through test into production, test it fully, and secure the environment. In parallel, I'd be hoping to do that for CICS 6.1. Probably the most difficult situation would get is when I'm running in a mixed mode in production with that one. And it would depend on the nature of updates. As you know, with any security patches, they're all sort of super secret when they're advertised, and we all run around working out what it is. And we possibly have to apply in parallel in production. I don't think that would be particularly easy. But applying it before we've gone live in production to test environment is pretty straightforward. It would be a little bit of extra work, but not too bad. But if it's security and it's vital, then yeah, you've got to do it. And I guess just that last page, it might impact timelines a little bit. Hope that answers your question.
The thanks from Nate. Thank you, everyone.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Any more questions? Please feel free to post, or if you want to unmute. Okay. It's Hugh. I'm trying to find Hugh's. Hugh maybe. So Hugh, can you try to?
Oh yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I'll keep it as short as I can. I just wanted to say, Rob, that as somebody who has run CICS upgrades for a big bank and is currently involved in running one, to hear these insights from someone with so much experience and running such a gigantic environment, I thought we had a lot of CICS regions at 500 or 600, is just brilliant. And I'm going to go back to these slides again and again and again. I really appreciate it so much. This was a fantastic session. It's worth coming to this whole conference just for this session. So thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you very much, Hugh. I appreciate the feedback.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Anyway, my contact details are there. And if anyone, GSC members, wants to reach out and have discussions about upgrades or anything like that, we're always open. And hopefully we can learn from you as well. So thanks very much, everyone.
Great. Thank you. And there are more comments. What a great session it was. Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback, everyone. Yeah. Okay. I'll close the call now. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
See you in the rest of the session, CICS sessions. Bye.